Okay, I'm going to scroll back up to the top so I don't lose anything. But Brian, there were other games in college football that we need to talk about, and let's start off with the one that we kind of talked about yesterday, the Iowa State game, just because of how strange the stats ended up being for a 10-point Iowa win. The offensive stats for them were, I mean, pedestrian at best.
Weird.
And it just because of turnovers. That
4 turnovers,
if that's not the definition
turnovers
of turnovers,
bad places.
Yeah, the definition of bad turnovers.
Yeah, giving turnovers that led to, like, one of them led to a 6-yard fumble return. That means you fumbled deep in your own territory.
Right.
You know, their next it was a 14-10 game in favor of Iowa, and they had that fumble, and it was like kind of late in the third quarter. Neither offense was doing anything in this game. It was really good defenses by both, especially Iowa's defense was really good. But Iowa's offense has not looked good to me. They're feasting on turnovers because they did the same thing in their opener against Indiana. Their offense was very pedestrian against Indiana. I kind of look at Iowa right now. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is you can't count on forcing 1 million turnovers every game. You can't focus on blocking punts. They've forced 7 turnovers in the first 2 games. 7 turnovers.
But that's not how you win. I mean, yes, it's how you win games. You
can't win it week after week. They've gone for 303 yards and 173 yards of total offense in their 2 games. They have 476 yards of total offense in their first 2 games. Notre Dame had that in almost each of their first 2 games.
Right. And I mean, there were problems with Notre Dame.
And it's not like, okay, and the other thing is, when you force, like, okay, so like I coached a team at Muhlenberg College. We averaged 40 points a game in the regular season. We only averaged about 350 yards of offense per game because our average starting field position was the 48-yard line. Like, okay, you can't rack up a whole lot of yards when you, you know, and we had like 7 special teams touchdowns that year. You know what I mean? So when I look at it, say, okay, that yards can be misleading, but they averaged 4.7 yards per play against Indiana and 2.9 yards per play against Iowa State.
Right.
Their offense is not good. And you're not going to force on average, you're not going to be able to get away with it. And it's timely turnovers too, which kudos to them for doing that.
Sure.
But
they won in the game.
You just can't. And Ladarius is Iowa's a good team. I don't know what y'all don't see. Never said they're not a good team. They're just not going to keep winning games averaging 200 and let's see their offenses. They're not going to win a lot of games averaging 238 yards of offense per game and 3.8 yards per play.
And where does that rank them? 238 yards a game.
Well, the 238 yards. Let's look at the yards per play because the 238 yards again. They had a drive that went -6, a scoring drive that went for -6 yards against Iowa State
because they had a field goal.
Right. They had another scoring drive that went 18 yards. Their first scoring touchdown went 49 yards, right? Those aren't long drives, but yards per yard. So total offense, just for fun, total offense, they rank near the bottom of the country, 126th.
Yeah, 130
in total offense. But let's look at a more realistic number, and that's yards per play. They rank because that's more determined by your efficiency, not necessarily you got a lot of short fields. They're 125th,
right?
125th in yards per play. That's not good. Now they're still winning because of the turnovers, but again, you're not going to keep doing that week after week after week. You're not going to beat a bunch of teams, with a quarterback that's completing barely 50% of his passes.
Yeah.
You're just not. I mean, you're not going to beat teams all year. He's actually completing 50% of his passes. He's 24 of 48 on the year for 251 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, we got something here, Vince. This is a good one.
Okay, hit me.
Adam C. I'm going to get rid of this ESPN stuff blasting in my ears. Adam C. 40. Yeah, sorry. It's like because ESPN just like this randomly will start playing the ads in the middle of things. As a Toledo parent, I'd like to thank Notre Dame for a first-rate experience. You know what was kind of funny, Vince? The first person that recognized us at the game on Saturday was a Toledo fan.
Yeah, it was.
He was like, Mr. Driscoll. And I was like, is my dad here at the game? And he said, hey, I'm a Toledo fan. I've been listening to your show all week. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. They got a good squad. Really cool. You guys are going to have a good season. It should be a lot of fun to watch. So, they put up a fight. They put an absolute fight, and your fans brought it. I will say that. Your fans brought the noise and the energy, and their section was packed. And you could see dots of Toledo fans, throughout the stadium as well. So, everyone that I ran across, they were great. So, kudos to you as well.
Yeah, Ohio State, Oregon, Vince. I want to talk about that one.
Well, and that was the one we kept getting updates because we watched a little bit of it, to start before we took off. And then we were getting updates throughout, and Oregon pretty much controlled at least the score of that game the entire way.
Yeah. And Ohio State's offensive stats were a tad misleading too. They threw for a bunch of yards, but they had turnovers, and
they did.
And a lot of it was just trying to come back. They threw for 484 yards,
484
54 passes.
Yeah, 64% of those 54 passes were complete, 9 yards on average. But the QBR was 81.
Yeah.
So that kind of tells you a little bit about what was going on there. And the Oregon kid, Anthony Brown, he was like 48% of his passes,
but he just managed it, man.
But it was the run game.
Yeah.
Look,
269 yards.
Yeah, exactly. That was my biggest thing with Ohio State last week. When they were playing Minnesota, is they got run all over, and that's going to be their Achilles heel at this point.
Now, these are the two most experienced lines they're probably going to play all year.
Fair enough. Okay,
but they got bullied.
Yeah.
And this is a defensive line with a bunch of highly ranked recruits. And like a friend of mine was like, they're real young. I'm like, no, their rotation guys are young. Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith and Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent and a lot of those guys, those are veteran guys. Those aren't young guys. They're bringing young guys off the bench.
Yeah.
They shouldn't. But I'll tell you, part of the problem too is their linebacking core is very pedestrian. And their secondary does not strike fear into my heart at all. It's amazing for as many highly ranked recruits as they've landed.
Yeah,
how mediocre they look in the back seven.
Right.
And then what was supposed to be the thing that overcame that was a great defensive line. And people are just saying, okay, you've got athletes there, but we're just going to beat you up. And so far, they're 2 for 2 in that regards. Because if Minnesota had an offensive coordinator that was worth a grain of salt, they might have been able to beat Ohio State or at least be in it late, and they missed so many opportunities to put Ohio State away in the second and third quarter. But I enjoyed that thoroughly. I went back and watched, and they were just beating Ohio State up.
Thoroughly.
And
you don't expect
physically
that from
beat them
Oregon
up.
Team. You don't expect them to be just a physical, dominating run team.
Yeah.
This
is what Oregon thought they were going to be last year.
Okay.
Before COVID, because they had Penei Sewell, and you know what I mean. And they had he opted out, and another guy opted out, and this is what Oregon thought they were going to be before COVID wrecked their season. They thought they were going to have this great offensive line, and then because all those guys opted out, some other guys got experience, and now they're all back.
Right.
Vince, it was fun. It was fun to watch that. And I'll tell you what, Anthony Johnson did a great job spreading the ball around too. He threw for 236 yards, which isn't a ton, but 12 different guys caught a pass in that game.
Right.
He had 17 completions. That's spreading the flipping ball around, and that's playing a lot of dudes.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I enjoyed that. Ohio State had 3 receivers go over 100 yards. They're receiving, and that's the other thing is if their receiving core wasn't what it was, that game's not close.
Yeah, their receiving core is so good.
It's ridiculous.
So good.
It really is. It's to me, it's on par. I don't know if I'd say it's better. It's close to what Bama's was 2 years ago.
It's fair.
When they had Jerry Jeudy and Devontae Smith and Waddle and Ruggs, I'd say it's close. Those guys, I think, were maybe a little bit more explosive athletes. This group is a little bit – they've got 3 Devontae Smiths as far as style of play.
Yeah.
Great route runners and, they got a bunch of Devontae Smith and Jerry Jeudy types. Maybe Jerry Jeudy might be a better comparison, but – and that's a great receiving core. But
no doubt.
Their offensive line didn't look good to me. They've moved some guys around. They got Thayer Mumford playing guard now, and they just don't. They look slow up front to me. I don't know if you saw that much of that, Vince, but
I didn't see a whole bunch of it.
Especially even against Minnesota, they look sluggish up front.
Okay.
They put too much weight on those guys, is what it looked like to me.
Gotcha.
And that
makes sense.
That was an interesting one. That was the big upset of the weekend for sure.
So the next one that I want to talk about, Brian, involves 2 Notre Dame opponents, and still, I would say a surprising outcome. I don't know if it was necessarily an upset or not, but a surprising outcome. Stanford just –
I'd say that's a surprise. At USC,
okay.
I'd say that's surprising, don't you?
Just putting the beat down.
Stanford lost to Kansas State 24-7 in the opener. Now, they did make a quarterback change. So Jack West started against Kansas State, and Tanner McKee came off the bench. Mm-hmm. Tanner started against USC, and he played well. The 42 points I thought was a little misleading, Vince. They only had 375 yards of offense.
Right.
It's just USC's offense was so bad. And I've been saying this, Keaton Slovis is overrated and Graham Harrell's overrated. I have been saying that for how long? And you look at Stanford, they had a 87-yard drive, a 87-yard drive was one play. And like 87 of their 130 some yards came on one play. Second half, they had a 31-yard interception return, and then Stanford just put them away. They went up 28-13, and that was gut check time for USC. And USC's offense folded, and their defense folded. It looked like this is a team that just quit. I mean, that's what it looked like to me. I don't know how much of it you saw, Vince, but to me, it looked like USC just quit. Yeah,
and that doesn't surprise me at all because that comes from the top. And I've never really been impressed with Clay Helton and what he brings to the table.
But I hope that he turns it around, Vince, because I do not want him to get fired.
Yeah, I know, right? I want them to hold on to him.
Clay Helton to stay there forever.
They can hold on to him as long as they want, because regardless of how bad USC could potentially be, that's still a program that is very attractive to coaches. And if you get a good coach in there, they could be really, really good because they're right smack dab in the middle of some seriously fertile recruiting ground, and they've got a name, the tradition, and all that.
It was 42-13. USC scored twice in the final 6 minutes.
They had 15 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, they only had 13 points going into the fourth quarter.
They had 15 points in the final 6 minutes. Like, it was garbage time. Their last touchdown came with like 46 seconds left.
Right.
Like, that was embarrassing. I mean, that might be a job killer for him to lose to that Stanford team bad at home, and to have your team. And it's not always about losing; it's about how you lost. Your team quit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was not afraid of Stanford in any way, and I'm still not. I'm still not.
I watched that game. I'll tell you what, though. I'll tell you what I like about Stanford.
Okay,
they have some receivers. They have some kids that can catch the ball. John Humphreys, you remember that kid? Notre Dame tried to recruit him a little bit. I thought he had some tough catch. Elijah Higgins is a big old kid from Texas. They have one of their running backs I love is E.J. Smith. It makes me feel so old. It's Emmitt Smith's kid.
Oh, no kidding.
So I felt super old. But yeah, they've got those. You know how when Stanford's really good at those big receivers could just win one-on-ones?
Right.
They got a bunch of those guys back now.
Yeah, those
Elijah
guys
Higgins is that. Tremaine is that. John Humphreys is that. Austin Jones couldn't get anything going in the running game. Nathaniel Pete had an 87-yard touchdown run. He didn't do a whole lot else other than that. Their running game's got some issues because their offensive line's not very good, but they were able to just make plays on the perimeter. USC's secondary is when you consider how many highly ranked kids they have, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Well, yeah, you talk about Stanford's run game. I mean, you're right. Nathaniel Pete had that 87-yard touchdown run, but then the rest of the backs that got touches, the long was 5, 3, 3, 7, 2. I mean, they weren't exactly, busting out any long runs. That's for sure. So they had a tough time getting anything going, and they average the averages that they had 1.3, 1.8, 2.5, 0.6. It's just not good, frankly, on the ground.
How much did you enjoy watching Texas get blasted by Arkansas? I normally don't root for SEC teams, and if Texas was still just in the Big 12, I would have rooted for Texas. But I have not so now anti-Texas anymore now at this point in time because they're the one that drove this whole SEC thing.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
And watching one of the worst teams in the SEC run for 333 yards on them was hilarious.
and Arkansas is not a great team.
They will finish in the bottom half of the SEC West.
They're not a great team because we talked about Arkansas because Notre Dame was obviously supposed to play them last year before everything hit. And, they were very active in the transfer portal, all of those different things. But they just they're 2-0. They hammered Texas, absolutely hammered them. And their quarterback only threw the ball 19 times, but he completed 14 of them for 138 yards, so nothing special there. But the run game, that's where they got them. 75 yards, 73 yards, 67. I mean, it was just, okay, who wants to get some yardage here? Yeah, come on in. Here you go. You know, it's like it was just wow. I mean, it's unbelievable. Texas has fallen so far. Now, I don't know if they're going to stay there, if Sarkis, get them going or whatever. But
I like Sark, and I've always kind of liked Texas as sort of like a team that I like on the side. Not anymore.
Yeah,
and it's not. I don't have an issue. I don't blame Sark because I don't think Sark was like, "Hey, I'm here. Let's go to the SEC." This has been happening. This has been in the works way before he got there.
Absolutely.
But I hope Texas gets I root for them to lose every week now. Like if they played Michigan, I'd root for Michigan.
Oof.
Like seriously.
Okay.
Like that's how much I despise Texas right now for what they're trying to do to college football.
Okay,
and all based on greed. Based on.
It is. It absolutely
and I hope they
is.
get embarrassed. Miami's in a little bit of trouble too, Vince. I know you got to run here, but they needed a comeback to beat Chase Bryce in Appalachian State. Chase Bryce has transferred to like another team now. He went from Duke, and they didn't win a game. I don't think he won a game last year, Duke. Maybe one. And then he goes to App State. He was at Clemson. He was a kid that came off the bench against Syracuse in 2018 when Trevor Lawrence got hurt.
Okay, I know.
Because when Trevor was named the starter, Kelly Bryant transferred.
Right.
And then Trevor got hurt like in the first half in that game. Yep. And Chase Bryce came in, and they almost lost to App State at home. Miami could be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
And BYU had a big win this weekend over Utah. Pretty convincing win over Utah as well. I mean, I don't know if you saw much of that game or not, but BYU was physical in that game. They looked like a completely different team than like last year. They had the quarterback, and they were throwing it all over the place.
Sure.
They came out and just ran it down Utah's throat, and that surprised me.
Yeah.
I didn't think that they could do that. I really didn't. I mean, I thought Utah would win, but I thought it'd be a much more competitive game. It was 23-7 at one point in time.
Well, and
BYU was up.
I was going to say because Utah put up 10 points in the fourth quarter. So
Utah has a very generic offense. I mean, I just don't know how coaches think they can. I just don't know how coaches think that they can win that way.
Right.
This isn't like when you beat Alabama back in 2008, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'll never understand that. Any other games, Vince, before you have to bail that you want to? Oh, and by the way, for everybody freaking out about Toledo, Cincinnati beat Murray State 42-7. It was tied 7-7 at halftime.
Yes, it was. It was.
Texas A&M barely beat Colorado. It is early, right? And Notre Dame's 2-0.
Right.
They're going to be all right.
That's the bottom line.
They're going to be all right.
So that's kind of our look back, and I think Bryan is going to get in there and answer some questions.
Try to answer some more questions here.
There's some good ones in there for sure, but I will see everybody tomorrow.
I got to ask you one question about college football, Vince. If you were creating the spread of what you think the point differential is going to be for Nebraska at Oklahoma, what would you say it's going to be?
Nebraska at Oklahoma, about 24.
Okay, it's 22, so good. Oh. I'd set it at 40. Oklahoma's going to murder Nebraska this weekend. It is going to be
generous,
so
I guess.
You were being realistic because the line is 22.
Okay,
so you picked a really you picked a really good line. I'm looking more at I just think that Oklahoma's going to murder Nebraska. I think it's going to be ugly.
They're going to run it up too.
Absolutely, especially as Nebraska's trying to get out of the game.
Right? Were they really?
Yeah. They are going to destroy Oklahoma or Nebraska so bad it's going to be ugly.
It's going to be fun to watch is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Thanks for joining us, Vince. Yep. We'll see you tomorrow.
You bet. I'll see you guys later. See you tomorrow at 12:30.